Welcome to Grosse Point Congregational Church for our Sunday worship. We're glad to have you with us. Enjoy our sermon this morning. Following the message, you'll find a link to give to our church, as well as a web link so you can visit our church website for upcoming future church events. Many of our events are done over Zoom. We hope that you'll be able to attend any or all of our scheduled activities. God's blessings be with you. Enjoy our message from Sunday morning.
By now, we've probably all heard about the Great Resignation, but what is it? Is it about, as some have said, a season of rebellion? Is it about wages or something else? For some, it's realizing that some workers are not treated decently nor fairly and are finally doing something about it. I thought about this as I was thinking back to when I used to work for a pizza place in 1995 and 1996. At that time, I was a driver earning a whopping $5 an hour plus tips, plus 50 cents per order. And as a high school student, that was incredible income. After all, my parents paid for everything else. And my favorite nights came when the hospital staff across the street, which was roughly 500 yards from the front door of our store, sent in 30 orders. Even before the tip, I knew I had $15 for my Fix the Car fund. This was a special fund which I established using the per order funds, which was earmarked to pay for the wear and tear of my car. And it did. New tires, new transmission, and a new starter. The last two died on the same night. Our store had 5 drivers, 3 cooks, and 2 wait staff per shift. Chatting with my coworkers about their pay, drivers and cooks earned exactly $5 an hour. But wait staff had a bizarre payment structure. Wait staff received $2.50 an hour. However, the store claimed they were paid $5 an hour because the wait staff had to enter the amount of tips they collected at the end of their shift, and it had to equal a sum of $5 an hour. Otherwise, the shop made up the difference. But this is where it gets tricky. If the wait staff entered in too many times that they didn't earn that $5 an hour based on their tips, they're placed on probation. And if they experienced a shortage of tips after a 15 or during a 15-day notice, if they didn't improve their tip income, they were fired. We rarely had persons fired because the wait staff would pool their tips together to help each other get to the $5 minimum income. This was done by the money being placed in a bowl on top of the wait staff computer where they entered their tips and their hours worked. It was with this practice in mind that one night I was asked to join the wait staff since one of our waitresses had to go home early, sick. All night, I dreaded the terrible cash out process. However, as I sat in front of the wait staff computer to enter my tips and figure out roughly how to make $5 an hour, it was during that process I was counting my cash when the manager stopped me saying that he couldn't be bothered taking me off the driver pay scale. Therefore, he wasn't going to put me on the wait staff pay grade. Therefore, I have nothing to put into the computer. Just keep the money, head on home. Well, this bothered me. Even back then, this bothered me because I found that the wait staff was paid far less than us drivers. The store supervisor told me that if they paid wait staff equal wages to drivers, they would lose money. And yet here we were. I'm earning my $5 an hour plus the money I earned from the table, which granted wasn't as much as we earned as a driver. But it was weird because they also said waiting tables was easier, the justification for lower pay. And yet I found as a waiter, that wasn't true. It was far more difficult. People got refills on their drinks. People wanted more pizza. And if the pizza was delayed by even a minute, we got the brunt of their anger. As a driver, totally different world. You only see the person once. You get the pizza to their place in 30 minutes or less. You pray the officers aren't watching when you're zooming through the back roads to get the pizza there. But that's it. If the pizza tended to shift to the right or the left because you took the curves a little too sharp, you didn't even have to hear about it. Your store manager heard about it when they called on the phone. Not true as a waiter as you're trying to, balance this incredible pizza, lay it down. Oh, that doesn't look right. Are you kidding me? That looks great. No, just take it back. As a driver, didn't hear any of that. In fact, actually, it was pretty cool. If you mess up a pizza, you simply went back to the store, grabbed another pie, headed back to the house, and you still got double pay. Not bad. We won't say that we drop pizzas intentionally, but some things happen. But it was very strange. Here I am, a driver, earning more than the people who are waiting on tables. And yet, this unjust practice to me was that they weren't being paid equally. Still, my supervisor justified everything that would happen. So finally, I decided to look for a different job because here I was in high school. I didn't have bills to pay, but the wait staff did. So I gave this as a written report to my supervisor, who simply thanked me for my comments, recognizing that it was unfair to a degree, but he claimed corporate office wouldn't let them increase the wages for the wait staff. And though my actions were admirable, they couldn't follow my lead because it just was going to be too hard on the shop. So like my supervisor, many have known for a long time that this pay system is broken. And then COVID revealed how abusive the system really had become. No longer willing to be abused, the Great Resignation began. The term Great Resignation didn't originally begin with trying to turn entry-level jobs into living wage jobs. Rather, the phrase the Great Resignation was coined by an A&M professor who was talking to Bloomberg Businessweek about what he saw as the unfair wage system of women and minorities who are working on the front lines of a global pandemic. These workers were putting their lives on the line, yet they began noticing that other workers, though having similar work duties, received better wages. For example, a worker named Dustin Snyder from a McDonald's in Bradford, Pennsylvania, sent a fax to the regional owner requesting everyone at the store receive a 70-cent bump in their hourly pay. He reasoned that would bring their pay closer to the pay received at the nearest McDonald's, which was 20 miles away. Moments after the request was sent, Dustin's phone rang, and it was the regional supervisor. "Why'd you do it?" they asked. "I was trying to get better pay for my people," he replied. "There are better ways to go about this," chided his supervisor. "No one gets a raise." Then he was told, if your workers don't like it, they can quit. So he and every worker on the day shift did, as did the two shifts following them, including the shift managers at the store. The Bradford McDonald's was up and running the next day as the franchise owner also owned the store that Dustin wanted everyone's wages to match. The franchise owner bussed in $15 an hour workers from that location to reopen the drive-thru. Then he hired a whole crew of new employees from Pennsylvania, but he had to do it for $10 an hour, giving essentially his new workers the 75-cent raise his former employees had simply been asking for. Following this event, many claimed this was the beginning of the Great Resignation. However, Derek Thompson, staff writer at The Atlantic, says, a better term for what is happening is the big switch. This is a better way of considering what is transpiring because in the wake of COVID-19, workers across the United States, professionals as well as shift workers, are rethinking the work they do. This pandemic has been a catalyst for a new type of worker who is looking for a better work-life balance and for whom flexibility is a key factor. In some cases, workers decided to resign, to retire, or simply not work. In other cases, some walked away from their old job to new jobs, while others walked away to become rehired at the same job, simply with higher pay. Whether we call it the big switch or the Great Resignation, the point is, people are reassessing their value and they're taking a risk to follow a vision or perhaps a call towards something unforeseen, just as the disciples initially joined a big switch. In the 5th chapter of Luke and the 1st chapter of John, Jesus invited Peter, Simon, and the other fishermen and a tax collector to leave the workforce and follow him. Imagine the 1st century Palestinian Galilean Times headline. Several fishermen, business owners, and a tax collector joined a resignation movement. I suspect when James and John announced to their father Zebedee they were quitting the family business to follow Jesus, it was perplexing news. In Simon Peter's case, he didn't just quit his job and follow Jesus, he also changed his name. Clearly, his resignation was about a lot more than simply changing jobs. It was swapping one kind of work life for another as he followed Jesus. That is, until the events that took place prior to Easter. Once Simon Peter witnessed Jesus' death, he retreated with the other disciples, initially to hide and to avoid a similar fate as Jesus. Even though he told Jesus he was willing to follow him even to death, Simon Peter failed. And thus, Simon Peter had a lot to assess about his own lack of conviction and commitment to Jesus. In our morning's gospel reading, Simon Peter essentially informed the disciples that he was going fishing. It seems unexpected since he already walked away from that life of fishing, but this wasn't the first time Simon Peter had resigned. In the night of Jesus' betrayal, he resigned a second time. And now it seems he's resigning a third time. This time, though, there's a sense that he's trying to return to the life he had, which existed before he met Christ, as though pretending the last 3 years didn't happen. It didn't matter. He probably meant to do this alone, yet the other remaining disciples follow him to the beach and pile into the boat with him. In the morning, a stranger stood on the shore and observing their empty nets while they sat defeated in the boat, instructed them to cast their nets into the water on the other side of the boat. After following the stranger's instructions to cast their nets into the waters on simply the other side of the boat, their nets are filled with fish and their nets began to stretch to the point of tearing. And it's at that point they realized they were starting to relive that initial call from Jesus, their initial resignation. Following breakfast, Jesus and Peter have a heart-to-heart conversation. But instead of addressing Simon Peter's resignation, which took place while Jesus was on trial, Jesus instead addressed a different avenue of discussion. He asks him if he loves him more than these. Now, in the gospel reading, it's not real clear to what Jesus was referring to with the use of the word these. It could mean Jesus was referring to the other disciples, or maybe Jesus was asking Peter whether he loved him more than he loved fishing in the fish nets. I suspect Jesus was asking about Peter's love regarding the nets, as asking Peter to love him more than the other disciples would be an unusual request, since Jesus frowned constantly every time the disciples competed with each other over who would sit at Jesus' right hand or who loved him more. After Simon Peter responded that he loved Jesus more than work, Jesus challenged him to take a larger risk than he ever took before. A risk so large that instead of falling back into the previous lifestyle as a type of job security, he was challenged to resign from fishing for food and to lean fully into the life and call of ministry. Asked if he loves Jesus, Simon Peter responded, "I love you," to which Jesus commissioned him to feed my lambs, tend my sheep, and feed my sheep. With this commissioning, Jesus had Simon Peter look at the bigger picture and really assess what was important to his spiritual journey. Simon Peter was encouraged to take an inventory of his life and recognize that pursuing a lifetime of work was going to leave a void in his life, whereas working and serving persons and revealing God's presence in the world was going to fill his life with meaning. Just as persons who are switching professions in the wake of COVID-19 are recognizing there are jobs that can offer true happiness and can take on a spiritual depth, which perhaps was lacking before. For example, a close friend of mine had been working at Big Pharma and was in charge of a national team of representatives who would visit doctor offices around the United States and market the benefits of new medicines. However, due to COVID, she couldn't travel by air or visit the doctor offices. And due to hospitals focusing on helping patients survive COVID, a lot of electoral medical procedures were placed on hold. Due to this, she was reassigned to a new position within the company, which allowed her to be at home every night instead of on the road in a hotel. After work, since she was able to remain in the area, she was able to volunteer her time at her church, joining the leadership board and taking on a teaching role in Christian education. She said she really began to like the new role, both at work and in her spiritual life. However, one day earlier this year, she was informed that her new position at work was being phased out and that she would return to her previous role in the company, which would mean for her less time spent at home, less time spent at church. She said it was difficult, but she chose to retire. She said she enjoyed being spiritually filled and walking with others on their spiritual journey. It was a risk, but so far, she says, she has no regrets as she's happier now than ever before. Like Simon Peter, she took a self-inventory and realized that her work was not satisfying, as though her fishing net was empty all the time. But taking a risk for her took courage to leave it behind, to walk away and walk into newness. Simon Peter walked into newness by responding to Jesus and walking away from it all because he accepted an invitation from Jesus who said simply, "Follow me." In the wake of COVID-19 and having 2 years to take a self-inventory of our spiritual journey, Jesus still extends the invitation to us as he did his disciples, saying simply, "Follow me." Whether this means we join the great job switch or we utilize his invitation to promote fair wages for employees, Jesus' invitation to follow him also means we evaluate periodically if our job is satisfying and meets our mental, physical, and spiritual needs. All this will take courage as we follow Jesus and commit to walking into newness.